part of what we strive to do is correct narratives around African American people, around people of color. The existing narratives, many of which are what got us into the soup that we're in now. And we see our role and we see the role of filmmakers of color as being to kind of fill in the gaps in the narrative of what we understand to be the country, what we understand to be the history of the country. Changing the story was kind of a play on that idea.
Telling our own story, by people of color telling their own story, that will, in effect, change the story. And so that's what we want to do.
Over the years, Firelight has grown to include not just production as one of our key activities, but also a variety of artist support programs through which we try to help support and mentor emerging and mid-career filmmakers of color, documentary filmmakers.
I started in documentary films because I was kind of bumming around college, and this was in the early 70s. And I took a film class, and I kind of really liked it, and I was able to switch my major to film. And so I majored in film production at City College in New York and graduated with a degree in film production. And after that, I got a job with I just lucked out on a job with William Greaves, who was kind of the dean of African-American documentary filmmakers. And so Bill, whatever he recognized in me, he kind of pushed me, forward, I started out as an apprentice, kind of, and I was working as an assistant editor, and the editor left, and Bill said, "Okay, well, you finish editing this film." He went out to do a shoot. He said, "Okay, you're going to go with us to Atlanta to do this shoot, and you're going to do sound on this film." And I said, "I don't know. I never did sound before in my life, Bill." He said, "Well, you went to film school, didn't you? They taught you how to do sound in film school, so you can do sound." And so, I learned a lot, and finally I produced and directed some films for him.
When I was in college, I was an activist, political activist, and I studied, I thought I was going to come out of school and work in children's television or somehow in journalism or public affairs television. I got out of school and couldn't get a job. And then I started working in public policy and politics, and I just went that route. So I think for me, I felt when we started Firelight like I had come back around full circle, and that career-wise, the thread for me was being involved in social justice. So I felt like Firelight was another way to do that for me.
Revolution in this country that's occurring is in fact people coming forth demand freedom.
Because the subject matter of documentaries is so often today, in fact, these are the root people think of as the roots of documentary film. It's very colonial, right? So it's a very kind of Eurocentric, otherized take, anthropological take almost. That's what's thought of as the history of documentary, which is, I would say, not the only history of documentary. But I think the kind of currents of the perception and the point of view of the filmmaker are inevitably in the film as well. So it doesn't, I don't think that the collaboration is a given. I don't think the respect for the protagonist is given. I don't think the point of view, it's just not a given. And it very much depends on the identity of the filmmaker, actually, and what he, she, or they kind of takes as their responsibility with respect to the subject or protagonist.
Yeah, I think also it's almost like you need a new definition for a tour.
Yeah.
Because you're still, as a director, you're still on a tour, but you're a collaborative tour. It's not that you're on a tour from on high. You're collaborating. all down the line, from, your researchers to your associate producer to your subjects to, the person who does the sound mix, you are collaborating. I think that's really important.
But you're also really kind of, at least, in the films that we've done that involve people who are alive, who knew a piece of the story, we take their view of the story really seriously, And it's not that they get to tell a story. It's our story. If we're doing a film about the Black Panther Party, this is not the film that the Black Panther Party member might do. But we do take seriously their view of the story.
Yeah, eyewitnesses are
Yeah.
just, the backbone of so much that we do.
One day, the teacher said the blues grew out of the downtrodden sufferings of the slaves of slavery and the crying and wailing and all that. This became the blues of the people in chains and all that. Miles was in the back of the room somewhere, and he raised his hand while she was talking. And she said, yes? He said, you a goddamn liar.
When I do interviews, one of the things that I try to do is be hyper-focused on the person that I'm talking to, is really pay attention to what they're saying, to really hear what they're saying, to really have a conversation with them, to kind of not be thinking ahead to the next question. So I'll have, 6 pages of questions so that if I get stuck, I can just look down at the paper and go to the next question. But until I get stuck, it's just a conversation. So that is really important when I do an interview. I try to make people feel as comfortable as I possibly can, as we're sitting there. I'll kind of make some jokes. I'll tell them a little bit maybe about, my family, my wife, my something, anything, because they're sharing with me these stories and they don't know anything about me.
Yeah.
I'm just taking from them. I'll have a legal pad on my lap, and as they're talking, I'll write down, notes on the legal pad of what to go to next. They said this, let me follow it up with this, because I really, want to just have that conversation. One of my great questions for people is why. They tell me I was scared, blah blah blah. Why?
It's really interesting to watch Stanley do this because he can make anybody talk. He really can. I don't know what it is. My observation is that you're always operating on 2 levels. You're talking to this person. It's a very intense conversation, very intense focus, and people like that because people want to talk to someone who's listening. So it's very intense. But you're also at the same time you're also like you're looking at it as a filmmaker. So you're like, bing, that was a great one. Bing, that was. Then I have to have him say that again. He didn't say that right.
Marcia is a person that I can trust completely. A person that if she says something doesn't work, then it doesn't work. If she says, something has a comment, I've got to try to fix it, and that that is unbelievably valuable. It's like it's hard to even describe how valuable that is. A story I've told a couple of times.
I think you can describe how valuable that is.
It's incredibly valuable.
It's a credit.
When I did Miles Davis, Birth of the Cool, which was a very, very important film to me. Marcia hadn't seen any of it for a long time. So she had seen pieces. She hadn't seen the whole cut, and we sat down and looked at when we were kind of had our fine cut. We looked at it, together and on the computer and the moment was just so amazing to me because when the film was over, she turned to me and a tear was rolling down her face and she said, "You did it, and I'll never forget that because I knew I had done it. That was it. I didn't have to. I had to go ask anybody else. It didn't matter at that point. It really didn't matter what I knew it was there. And so I knew we were done. We both spent our childhoods going to Martha's Vineyard. Marcia has a brother who's 2 weeks younger than me, and so he was in my crowd of people. And at that point, on Martha's Vineyard, the black folks, you hung out with people who were a year older or a year younger, no more than that. So I didn't even really know Marcia at all.
He's 7 years old.
She's 7 years younger than I am. And she was then, and she still is. 7 years younger than me. Maybe she's more than that now. But anyway, so I didn't know she existed. But and our parents knew each other and all of those kind of things. And so as adults, we met again, and the rest is history.
It was kind of the boy next door, as close as I was going to get, I guess.
I think that one of the things that when we started thinking about doing the documentary lab, there were a couple of ideas that we went in there with. One is that we could raise money to support this documentary lab through different foundations and others. And we've been able to do that. It's been a constant struggle, a constant fundraising to do that, but we've been able to do that. And the other thing that we went in saying was that we believed that there were enough filmmakers of color out there who had great projects and were really talented and could make those films, and we've been able to do that, find great people.
Yeah, I think it's really, mentorship is the word we use, because I don't think we have a better word, but I'm not sure that it entirely captures what we are trying to do, because it implies that there's a kind of one-way support, dispensed from the mentors to the mentees, and that's not at all what it is. It's really, what we strive to do is to help filmmakers strengthen their own artistic voice, which is something really different from saying, this is how you do this is what you should do here, this is the only way you can do this. That's really not what our programs are about.
The people in the lab or the graduates are working together on other films. They're bouncing off, camera people, editors with each other. They're just giving each other support. They go to each other's, openings and screenings, and they're a real community, and that's something that's great to see, because, so many times, we've worked, literally in the dark, by ourselves, and almost made to feel like, we're in competition with other filmmakers, or especially other filmmakers of color.
Right.
When you feel like well, they're gonna take one black filmmaker, so
right.
It's got to be me, and so I think we one of the things that's happened is that idea is being pushed aside,
yeah.
And filmmakers are really collaborating and working together, and I feel that's the way it should be.
Absolutely. One way the fellows have described the experience is because in most documentary film spaces, like most art spaces, if you're Black or Indigenous or a person of color, you are going to be in a lot of spaces in which you are the distinct minority, if not the only one. And that position is simply not conducive to taking risk, which you have to do as an artist. You have to do that. And so to have a community in which you are not carrying that weight on your shoulder of representation, of being the Black person in the room, is liberating. It is for me, and that this is something that comes up again and again in the feedback that we get from fellows.
Stop the trial! Stop the trial! Stop the trial! Stop the trial! Stop the trial!
I think that I've been able to, been really lucky to. I mean, if if you had asked me, and told me that I would be able to make a film about the Black Panthers, about Miles Davis, about the Freedom Riders, and do screenings with the Freedom Riders, and have them get on stage and tell me how thank me, like thank you. I'm like, I felt like a fool because I would be in tears, at screenings and say, look, there's no way I would be up here without you. I mean, how could I possibly, be here? When I was a kid, there was nothing such as a Black film director, and the only reason that I'm here is because you guys sacrificed, your lives, put your lives on the line, and so, thank you, so. It's just been incredible for me, we opened Miles in Los Angeles almost like exactly a year ago. Mm-hmm. And, Herbie Hancock and Wayne Shorter came to the screening and just came to the screening and then just did the Q&A. Like, they just, they weren't supposed to, and they just did they just did the Q&A, and to be there with them and
surreal.
Yeah, it's also surreal. So, surreal. Yeah, I've been incredibly lucky to do the films that I've been able to do, and we've got a lot more to go, so it's great.
I mean, there's no shortage of compelling stories. There really isn't. I mean, one thing I hope we get to do is something that we've been kicking around for years also, and that is the role of women in the civil rights movement. Something that, everybody kind of talks about, oh, women were the backbone, but yeah, they were the backbone, but they were also the leadership. And so, that's a rich and still very relevant subject that I hope at some point we get to treat. Yeah. Fannie Lou Hamer being one of my personal heroes.
Yeah. One thing I promised myself that I would always say, is that I know for myself I've been extremely lucky, and I just want to say that, because you could sit there and talk about, filmmaking and make it sound like, it all happened, and it all was supposed to happen, and it all happened because I'm so great. And I got lucky, I got lucky a lot of times, and maybe I was able to respond to that luck, but I got lucky. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, I can't imagine living another life, I feel like this is what I'm supposed to be doing, what I've been doing for the last 20 years, and whatever I do next will be an extension of this. Time well spent.